Just before midnight, one Thursday in early August, a barrage of rockets and shells was unleashed on a small town in the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia. It came from the country's own government, determined to reconquer a rebel stronghold. But the rockets didn't just hit rebels. They hit many ordinary houses, including the one that was Taya Sitnik's home.
This is what used to be our stairwell. We were hiding in the basement down here.
Taya and her son Georgi rushed down here from her upstairs flat in Tskhinvali when the bombardment started at 11:30 on the night of the 7th of August. On the morning of the second day, a fragment of a tank shell hit her son in the neck. He bled to death in her arms.
This is where my son's blood was. The neighbours have cleared it up now.
Mobile phone footage shows the Georgians using notoriously inaccurate Grad rockets and taking their tanks through the streets. This is what the tanks did to Taya's building. 2 of them, she says, fired in... Tskhinvali, the focus of Georgia's attack, is the size of a small English market town. But it's the capital of a territory, South Ossetia, that broke away from Georgia nearly 20 years ago. Georgia says the Ossetians, backed by their ally Russia, used Tskhinvali as a base for ever more frequent attacks on surrounding Georgian villages. It says that's why, finally, on August the 7th, it counterattacked. But the opposite Ossetian version of events has barely been heard in the West. I've come to find out what they experienced on August the 7th and the days that followed. Tskhinvali hasn't been levelled to the ground, as the Russians claimed during the war. The world concentrated instead on what happened next, the invasion of South Ossetia and other parts of Georgia by the Ossetians' mighty allies, the Russians. The West was outraged.
There was a tit for tat.
In Gori, a Georgian town outside South Ossetia, the Russians occupied what was a brand new military base, newly equipped to NATO standards. So who was to blame for the outbreak of war? In the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, they say they can prove it was the Russians. And Huel, name's Sturdy and Huel.
Sturdy and Huel.
They're taking me to their top-secret monitoring centre, where evidence collected by this operative is at the heart of the debate. It's the tape of a phone call between 2 Ossetian border guards, apparently confirming that Russia began the war. One guard reports that a Russian armoured column has passed through the tunnel from Russia onto Georgian sovereign territory. What's crucial is the timing. The Georgians say the call was made at 3:25 a.m, some 20 hours before their attack. In the Georgian Interior Ministry, a senior official played me the recording. But despite this apparent evidence, Georgia didn't mention any Russian invasion when it went to war at the end of that day, the 7th. It didn't mention any proof until weeks later, because, it says now, it mislaid the tape. So even though this tape was so important as evidence of Russia's actions, you actually lost it for a month?
Well, we never lost it actually, because it was in the files. But we had about 6,000 intercepts of the same kind.
But this was crucial.
This was crucial.
So even one so important to your case, you didn't keep it separately?
No, that was a mistake.
Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, isn't convinced.
This tape is nonsense and it is a lie. Look, NATO with all, and the United States, with all the satellites monitoring this area very, very closely, how can they not know the truth? They know it, and we know that they know it.
Russia claims its army first crossed the border at the Rocky Tunnel on August the 8th, the day after the Georgian attack on Tskhinvali. I arrived by the same route, the first Western journalist since the war to be given unrestricted access to South Ossetia. If Georgia were right about the timing, Russian troops would have poured down this road from the 7th of August onwards. But our driver Alan Parastayev, an Ossetian who came this way on the morning of the 8th, says he saw no troops at all.
That's why the panic was in South Ossetia and in Tskhinvali as well. And even some of the authorities said that the Russians betrayed us and they don't want to help us anymore.
In Tskhinvali, Ossetians say they had to fight the Georgians alone. That makes them all the prouder of the spoils of war. Far from having carefully planned their invasion, as Georgia has suggested, it seems the Russians had to scramble to get organised. Their intelligence was so poor that when they finally approached Tskhinvali on the 9th of August, their advance column drove straight into a Georgian ambush, a defeat witnessed by a Russian reporter who was himself wounded.
A Georgian ran up. I was dressed in black jeans, an ordinary green jumper with a hood. And I said to him, "We're journalists." He shouted back, "We're killers," and fired a grenade. Only 5 armoured vehicles got away. The rest of the column was wiped out, and there were a lot of wounded, including the army commander, General Khrulyov. From a military point of view, the commander of an army has no business in an advanced column coming to storm a town.
But journalists weren't the only non-military target hit that day. It's alleged that the Georgians continued firing, intentionally or not, on ordinary civilians.
It's destroyed. Look at the shells they used. Clearly not machine gun. Look, they were large shells.
Видите, от какого крупнокалиберного они стреляли.
This was Marina Kochyeva's car. She alleges it was hit repeatedly by Georgian tank fire as she tried to flee Tskhinvali on the night of August the 9th. They crashed into a ditch, but the firing didn't stop.
My fellow passenger covered me with his body and he was hit. If he hadn't been hit, the bullet would have been for me.
You were driving fast and it was night time. Maybe they simply thought that you were fighters.
Знаете, как я хочу сказать, боевики идут туда,
Fighters go towards the fighting. They were lying in wait for people like me, people who were frightened, who were weak, who were fleeing the fighting. They didn't allow us that. Only thanks to God's help did we survive. But lots died on this road.
There is another side to the story, and this is it. The wholesale destruction after the war of ethnic Georgian villages inside South Ossetia by Ossetian militia. Ossetians say the villages were used by the Georgian military, but this was plainly a family home. Its former occupants are now among the 16,000 Georgian refugees from South Ossetia sheltering on the other side of the dividing line. It's hard to believe that the Georgian family who lived here will ever be allowed to return. The destruction of this house and hundreds of others is a deliberate act of ethnic cleansing. In Tskhinvali, I met one of the perpetrators.
It was not cleansing. There wasn't any genocide of the Georgian people. No one was killed. They were given a corridor so that they could calmly get out of there. When they'd left their villages, their houses were burned so they didn't return. It's enough just to set light to the curtains and the whole house will flare up. If you ever want to burn someone's house, that's my advice. Simply set light to the curtains and that's enough.
By the time those houses were burned, Russian troops had finally arrived in force, driving the Georgians out of South Ossetia. But the Russians failed to prevent the willful destruction of civilian property.
No, this is not ethnic cleansing. This was also the area of the war. The Georgians, when I say that the Georgians were moving their artillery and tanks closer to Tshinval, this also included the Georgian enclaves inside South Ossetia, where they secretly organized strongholds.
But we've talked, for example, to Ossetian militiamen who talked about how they burnt and destroyed those houses after the immediate conflict. Shouldn't Russia somehow have prevented that from happening?
Well, of course, when your city is attacked, when your loved ones, when your relatives, when your children, when your parents, brothers and sisters are being killed brutally, you can go emotional and you can go really in a very unwanted way.